to The Dish Pig, where we go on a journey of discovery in the food and booze world. I'm your host, Nick Sherry. So good to be bringing you a new episode. But first, we have some fan mail. I received an email from Jack, who lives in London, and he writes, "Hi Nick, love the podcast. My wife, little boy, and I live in London and enjoy each episode thoroughly. Your charm and charisma really shine through, and the guests you bring on are sharing some inspiring life stories." Oh, thank you, Jack. He goes on to write, "I did, however, want to bring something to your attention. I noticed in a previous episode you mispronounced the word steak tartare. As a proud Englishman, I must uphold the history of our proud language and take action when it's being butchered by a larrikin, uneducated Australian, however eloquent or charismatic they may be. The correct way to pronounce the word is tartar. I hope this helps, and good luck with your future endeavours." Well, Jack, I do appreciate it. Thank you very much for the tip. I must offer my apologies to you and the people of the United Kingdom, including King Charles, and I'll be sure to watch my pronunciation in the future. Although I could really go for some steak tartare right now, actually. But anyway, now let's get to this week's episode. This week I caught up with Nick Stone. He's the founder and CEO of Bluestone Lane, which is an Australian-inspired collection of cafes. And it all started as a side hustle with a hole-in-the-wall coffee shop in Midtown Manhattan, and is now morphed into a $100 million business with locations all over the United States. So, let's get into it. Nick Stone, thanks for being here. Thanks for trekking up here to the sophisticated studio I have here in Newport Beach. It's very kind of you.
Lovely spot, Nick. No, great to be here. Beautiful view.
Yeah, it's a beautiful day. The summer's here. We did have that hurricane in quotations, although it was a hurricane in a lot of places except here. I think there was a lot of beat up in the news about how big it was going to be. But
it's very Californian that they dramatise everything, and it was actually some welcome rain, I think, for certainly our garden. So, most of California benefited from it. Of course, Palm Springs got
yes
inundated, but I was very happy. But the only thing was juggling the kids on Sunday because it rained all day and having them inside.
I think, and schools were going to get, I think, cancelled in some spots on Monday, but I think down here they all went back.
No, they all went back. My kids went back. Yeah.
Now, Nick, what was the last thing you cooked for yourself?
Well, I cooked dinner last night. Actually, it's quite of a rarity, but we just had. We had salmon, fillet of Atlantic salmon, and what else did we have? Broccoli, Chinese broccoli, and rice. Actually, jasmine rice. So it wasn't, but we had soy sauce, which is my kids are obsessed with soy sauce. They only tried it for the first time maybe a few months ago. Yeah, and they are addicted to the salt. So got to be mindful there. But
I mean, when you think about it, when you describe that meal to get your young kids eating that for dinner. That sounds pretty impressive. Like, you can get some pretty picky eaters for youngsters.
Well, you go very hungry in the Stone household if you weren't eating everything. Alexandra, my wife, has a background in nutrition, and she's a biomedical scientist, and she does not play around with varieties of food, and very much vegetable, clean, probably limited meat, to be honest. It's so the kids all eat. I think about the things that I didn't eat when I was younger. I didn't eat eggs. I didn't eat avocado. I wouldn't have a business, would I? But our kids, they eat everything. They're pretty adventurous, which is definitely must come from her side, not from me.
Oh, that's fantastic. You haven't been to there's a place down under the PCH called Pearson's Port. It's like a little fish shack.
Many times.
You've been there?
Yep.
They have, and I was chatting to the owners there one day because they had some sensational salmon that they bring in directly from Tasmania.
That's right, Australia. Yeah,
and that was sashimi grade, kind of just carving it off.
It's incredible. Like when you go down there, you think that am I going to be mugged or I'm going to see a floating body? But there's this little shack and ice chests everywhere. It's a great experience with the kids. Actually, they love it. But great produce, and it's I think it's fantastic that the kids that they are far more adventurous and they're trying more vegetable-led dishes and different flavours. credit to Alexandra again for getting them to try.
Yeah, it's that's full credit. Well, yeah, like I said, thanks for being here. We're obviously here to talk about just this, small little coffee shack kind of business that you created here in the US, but it's obviously much bigger than that now. But I thought it'd be good just to take a bit of a step back in terms of your career, because you've had two career shifts if we go back to where everything started. Because out of school, did you go straight to the AFL as a player out of high school?
Yeah. In year 12, I was drafted just before I'd finished my VCE exams. I did my English exam on the Friday. I got drafted on the Sunday. Then I had 2 math methods exams, 2 Chinese exams, economics exam, something else, geography. And I'll never forget Dad dropping me off because I hadn't turned 18 yet, dropping me off at Victoria Park and walking in to a bit of a decrepit stadium full of a lot of seagulls and pigeons. But it was Mick Malthouse's first day and as new coach.
Right.
And then Bucks was there and Eddie was the president.
Yeah.
And I remember my parents, or maybe I asked the head of recruiting, Noel Judkins, I said, maybe I should do my VCE, first, get that done before I start training. And they're like, no, get straight into training. So I remember leaving training and then doing a Chinese exam in the afternoon. Needless to say, I didn't crush that one. But anyway, right, all part of the folklore.
Well, I mean, when you rattle off those subjects that you were doing your final exams for, for the most part, you wouldn't picture an AFL footy player punching out those subjects at the same time. Like, was there a point where you knew you were on the path for AFL, or was it a bit of a this could go either way, or did you ever kind of second guess, that next step with playing?
It was always my childhood dream because my uncle played at Melbourne, and my father was a good sportsman. And my grandfather was as well before he sort of went to World War II.
Yeah.
And it was the dream. And then in year 12, I had a good year playing for the school and then playing for Prahran Dragons, which became the Sandringham Dragons. We won the premiership that year, so that was a great day. Playing on the MCG when they used to have the curtain raisers. So under 18, and it was on Channel 7, and I'm still at school, so people are watching it. And then you had the reserves, then the AFL Grand Final. So that was pretty amazing, but... I guess I thought I was a decent chance going into the draft, but it just happened. And my parents were fantastic because even though I was so excited and very committed to trying to make it in the AFL, they were quite balanced and they were realistic. And they were saying, even if you have an amazing career and you play 10 years, what are you going to do from the age of 30? And it's not just economically; it's the utility. Like, what's going to keep you interested? Because you got to have motivation to get up every day and you need fulfillment. So for me, I played 6 years at three teams, 2 years at each. So definitely a journeyman. Very fortunate that all teams were based in Melbourne.
Yep.
So I stayed at home the whole time, living with mum. And I went to university for those 6 years. So did a business degree at Monash University over 6 years. So I finished my last exam and then the next day got the call from Grant Thomas that my contract's not being renewed, and I was fortunate that I'd worked on trying to get an internship into investment banking or banking and finance, and then once I started that, obviously I decided I'd had enough of AFL. It's probably given it a good go. I was 23, just about to turn 24, and transitioned into banking. It was only a few years later that I was in New York, and I've just been really fortunate but worked very hard. I juggled 2 things at once. Of course.
Because, with the AFL, it seems like one of those things where, the sport has definitely grown a lot and there seems to be a lot more money in it these days for players. But there's only probably a certain, there's a large group that when you are playing and you know that your career is only going to go a certain amount of years is to plan for, what does come next. I think a lot of us see kind of, ex players go into the media and, become, commentators or working in the news space that way. But again, like there's only probably a certain amount of jobs in that field, and even if there's an interest to do that as well. Did you kind of come across a lot of other players kind of planning for that, that next step in their career once their playing career came to an end?
Yeah, I think the AFL and the AFL Players Association were really pushing and encouraging all the players to do something, whether it's at university or vocational training or an apprenticeship, and they provided one day during the week where you didn't have to go to training.
Right.
You were precluded from going to the club. So, and then the AFL Players Association actually paid for your university if you passed the subject. So they'd reimburse you. So that was pretty incredible.
Yeah.
And that was a really intelligent move because the average career in the AFL, I think, is 2.5 seasons. So,
Is it that low?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, really low. And yes, you're right. The amount of players that transition into media is probably 0.001%.
Yeah.
And then those that are still in the media 5 years later is probably, half of that. So that's not really going to be a play to bank your future on. And I think that I was really conscious of that transition. And I think also without being a superstar in the AFL, it really gave me a ton of motivation to make sure my next career that I was going to be an absolute star. That was a drive within me because there's the AFL, it really does focus on of course everyone plays their role, but there is certainly a lot of focus on the best players in the team. And I wasn't even a regular senior player. I was always in and out of the seniors. I'd play really well in the VFL, sort of dominate the VFL, go to the AFL, maybe play a couple of games, then get dropped. And I was just very much a journeyman and never really ever felt comfortable. I think the most I played 9 games in a row in my second season at Hawthorn. That was the most sort of stability I ever had. But I was determined that after this, I'm not going to let it. I'm going to take all those transferable skills, which are incredible. You think about 17 years of age, that you are exposed to such high pressure environments where you got to find edges to win and compete, and the resilience and the commitment that you need to go to training and your first pre-season when you're 17 or 18. It's a lot, and it's unbelievable. It builds you this base an amazing platform to explode off into another field. And I'm glad that I kept it going despite a number of pre-seasons where I didn't go away because I had to stay for my uni exams and it sort of worked out, and it's transitioned and benefited banking. And then, of course, now, which is also back in teams in hospitality, which really, that's what it's about. You really have no intellectual property. It's just about people and getting along and working towards one single goal.
And so you're in New York.
Yep.
You're working for the ANZ.
Yes.
At what stage did you realise that, okay, I'm now going to be leaving this career as well and, as you said, moving into hospitality with Bluestone?
Great question. So I moved to New York in 2010 at sort of around September. I studied over there, and as part of this sort of exchange program where I was doing my MBA, ANZ were vacillating between transferring me or not. They were concerned about the GFC and the fallout, and if corporate finance was going to remain in the North America business. And there was, just before I left, there was I think that they realised that there was a terrific opportunity to build the business because a lot of the US banks had been in distress and they were receding. So there was a chance for us to try and build back corporate finance and then focus on taking US multinationals to Asia, where ANZ had huge ambitions.
Yeah.
So I got this amazing opportunity, which I started in February 2011. And I had 9 months to prove the business case. And I was running both the US out of New York and the Europe and the UK out of London. And it just sort of all came about, which was fantastic. But while I was doing that, I couldn't believe how much I missed the quintessential Melbourne coffee experience, so Australian coffee experience, where it's not really about product. Yes, of course, having great quality coffee is important, but that is just a ticket to participate. That's not a strategy to win, because everyone has that. What's the most important elements are certainly this hospitality orientation and having locals, not customers, having someone say, no, I go to that place. Even though the coffee around the corner might be as good, might even be better, that they go to their local place because when they walk in, someone knows their name, face and order, and they feel a sense of belonging, community. And that for me was really missing in the US. So we launched our first store in July 23rd, 2013 in Midtown Manhattan, around the corner from where I worked in Park Avenue.
Yep.
And it was probably after a year and a half that there was a few grumblings about, wow, Nick's doing a lot on the side with coffee, but he's also running a team in the US and in Europe and in Asia. Like, how are we doing this? And I was on the leadership team. And, people are probably right making that assessment. Like, how's he doing it all? And is it impacting his performance? And then in probably early 2016, my boss had been so supportive. I had two different CEOs in New York, and the second one, Truett Tate, is an amazing guy and an entrepreneur in himself. He mentioned, hey, like, maybe you need to make a decision here. Like, you're going to be a banker, and because I probably had there was a clear pathway for me in banking, or maybe you give this thing a go and see what you can do. So I decided to take a year off in August 2016. And at that stage, we had 12 locations, and I took a sabbatical.
Oh, wow. Yep.
And for 1 year, and I was meant to come back in the middle of 2017.
Well, when you opened up that very first location at the time, what was the thought process? Because, like you said, you're in a successful banking career, on track for hitting certain goals. Within your career, what was the initial kind of outlook in terms of the plan? Just like do it as a side hustle for fun and just kind of literally see where it goes, or maybe just get a few going and then flog it off, or what was because at some stage there was going to have to be a decision. Yeah,
well, the first one was more like an experiment.
Okay.
It was a business case that I believed in. And my ambitions were pretty limited. It was, I'm solving a need that I have right now. I'm the core customer. I work around the corner. There's lots of Australians that work in this part of Manhattan. You have Macquarie, you had NAB, you had ANZ, you had Westpac. There must be enough Aussies to support this little hole in the wall in a Class B building in the bottom of a subterranean basement where you have no street visibility, no signage, underneath a broken escalator. It's tiny. It's like 15 to 20 square meters. And here it was like 150 to 200 square feet. Tiny. Yeah. But it was quintessential hole in the wall. So it was very authentic because it was so small. But, we did that, and it just, day one, I think we served 300 people the first day. And there was no way you could find this unless someone took you there. And it was well before social media really, Facebook was there, but Instagram had just launched.
Yeah.
It was still in its infancy. And then after that, we decided to do a second store, which opened on my birthday in October in 2013 in the middle of 30 Broad Street, which used to be part of the New York Stock Exchange in the financial district. It was an 85-year-old building that had never had a retail amenity. And basically, we put it in the back of the building where people used to frequently come in, and we made them bypass a coffee shop, which was very much like the office towers you'd see in Melbourne or Sydney, where the coffee shop in the foyer is like the ultimate lobby. It's the social hangout. It's where you connect with clients or colleagues and have a break. And I was like, this is great. This is exactly what we want. And that one was really successful. So after those two, we're like, well, maybe we should sort of keep going. And we only raised enough money for those two. We raised $350,000. And I put in about half of that. And then four mates put in 50 grand each.
Yeah.
And low ambitions of just like, let's open these two, let's pay everyone back, and then we'll have this, hopefully a positive cash flow sort of investment. And then it sort of all changed the next year.
Well, that was, that investment question was going to be where I was going to next. So you'd chipped in, some mates had kind of gotten together, and then after opening the second location, was that when you were like, okay, we think we have something here. It's time to start, taking this to the next level. Is that when you kind of knew that this was going to be a business that you want to scale, or was it just let's try and steadily add a couple of locations and maybe do one small round of investment? Like what did the next kind of that growth period kind of look like?
Yeah, it was reasonably constrained. Like we were still not that ambitious at that point. But what's amazing is flattery and positive feedback becomes infectious. And what happens with retail is you get a lot of tangibility, like immediately. So you could be working away on the most amazing pharmaceutical drug, like save cure for cancer, or you could be working on an algorithm that's going to build the next Canva or who knows. But, you know, and you're busying away and you're in stealth mode, or people, you can't even explain what you're doing. But with coffee and hospitality, like people can just walk in, they touch it, feel it. So the tangibility plays to your advantage. And so just, we were being inundated with a lot of positive feedback that people love the coffee, they love the service, they love the food. We introduced the avocado smash. No one was doing avocado toast back in mid-2013. I know it's hard to believe, and people are like, oh, yeah, sure, Nick, you're telling everyone that for your own self-interest. But the truth is, like, now it's ubiquitous, but back then it was rare and extremely hard to find.
Yeah,
and
I think I moved here 2011, and I'm trying to think when I first started seeing it popping up on menus, but I was kind of like, hang on a second, like this wasn't here, you know, a couple of years ago, and now, you know, what's taken over.
And so basically the following year we launched our first cafe. About on the 12-month, so the first year anniversary from the first location in Midtown Manhattan at 805 3rd Avenue opening, we opened our first cafe, which was a larger format, more quintessential cafe where it's table service, broader menu offering, and it opened in the heart of the West Village, which is where Alexandra and I lived. Mm-hmm. And we opened it one street away from actually where we were residing. And it was on corner of Perry and Greenwich Avenue. And the reason we opened it there was if you just went west along Perry Street, you went past the Stoop, the famous Stoop of where Carrie Bradshaw used to come down and meet the limousine from Mr. Big or Big. And so the Aussie tourists used to trek from the south north along Bleecker Street.
So you just get all that foot traffic So
that was the downside. We always thought like, okay, like worst case scenario, base case will be we'll get all the Aussie tourists because they walk along Bleecker Street because there's great little boutique shops, and that was where the world of Marc Jacobs really took off. He had 4 or 5 locations on Bleecker Street, and then you turn right, you go east along Perry Street, you go past Carrie Bradshaw's townhouse, you have a photo, and then when you cross 7th, you'll end up at our corner. And so we took it over, it was a landmark building. It hadn't had hospitality in it. It was previously a barbershop. The guy gone broke, just left everything. There was no scissors, but there was probably plenty of hair and floorboards. And then we just sort of reimagined it. There was a hobbit hole where I couldn't walk through without bending over. It was only like 6 foot, and those that know me, I'm a bit taller than that. And in the backyard, it had where they store the trash, and we realised that maybe we can put a deck on that to make it a little bit larger and put al fresco. And so essentially we opened that in May 2014, and that was the one that put us on the map. And at that stage, we had not completed our second fundraising, which was we raised $1 million through friends and family again, about 20-something friends. So there's lots of people who have little bits of Bluestone, and I'm so grateful for it. But that we opened it without air conditioning in New York. Now, that's not a smart move, especially not in July and August. But we had one little sort of like window unit, and we thought that'd do. But we didn't have it all worked out. But it was called Collective Cafe because we had all these Australian friends. We had an Australian designer, Australian builder. It was just this team effort. And the first day of demolition, I had 2 Aussie mates. Clancy Rutherford, who was a great footballer from WA. I remember he was studying at Columbia University. He came down with another mate, and we did demo. And within the first half an hour, I stood on a rusty nail. No joke. I'm in urgent care, like getting a tetanus shot. I wore the wrong boots or something, and then I came back and
through the boot. That's unlucky.
Yeah, but it was amazing. But we opened it, and then lo and behold, you have all the biggest celebrities in the world walking in, and they're walking in not because it's fine dining, experiential experience. The limos, they're walking in because they live in that area and they want to go to a great artisanal, independent cafe, which focuses on premium coffee, great food, great service. And that's how it exploded. And there was a few, we can talk a lot about this, but those moments, but there was a couple of serendipitous things. One, it was next to the number 1 spray tan place in Lower Manhattan. So you had all the Victoria's Secret girls going in there and then coming for a coffee next door. And then
handy.
And then lo and behold, when you start having people like Sarah Jessica Parker walk in, so Carrie Bradshaw, who lives in West Village, it just sort of it caught a bit of fire. And then we probably, at that point, we're like, yeah, we've probably got a little bit of the genie's out of the bottle. We've got a little bit of magic here, and maybe we can make it bigger.
And you were saying, so you actually called that the Collective Cafe. So that wasn't branded as a Bluestone Lane at the time?
No, it was branded Bluestone Lane Cafe, but on the awnings, it had Collective Cafe.
Got it, okay.
And when you looked at it on the website, it's called Collective Cafe, Bluestone Lane Collective Cafe, the same on Google. So for the people that knew the story, it was a great acknowledgement for their effort and their support. But, it just ended up, the nickname for it was Collective.
Got it.
That's what everyone called it. They called it Greenwich, or they called it Collective.
Got it. And then, so that location explodes. It puts you on the map.
Yeah.
When did you then kind of realize, okay, like we kind of know what we're doing here. We know that the customers like what we're doing here. It's time to take this to the next level.
Knowing what we're doing versus the customers liking what we're doing are two different questions. They're mutually exclusive in our case, but I think we're learning all the time on how to run this business, given the external environment has changed so much, and we're a different business now post-COVID, that's for sure. And we've put in place some things that you would never have thought were possible when we started. But, I think after we opened that, and then we ended up opening a store later in the year in Bryant Park, and it was a glass box linked to the Grace Building, which is on 42nd and 6th. And that was a Brookfield-owned building, and it was rare for a business of our sort of size and history and life cycle and counterparty risk to get such a prime spot. And Brookfield wanted probably twice as much as we ended up agreeing to pay, but we had to give them a termination right, and they ended up terminating a long time later because of another reason, but not because of performance. It was basically they wanted a termination right because we were above the International Centre of Photography.
Okay.
And they always viewed that they'd turn it all into an Apple store. Long story short, that's why they needed termination.
Got it.
Anyway, just details. But ultimately, that one opened, and it was probably the busiest coffee shop in Manhattan. It was 400 square feet, and it was serving at some days like 1,100 coffees a day.
Wow.
And we had no ice machine.
No ice machine.
No ice. And now everyone knows that like 75% or 70% of Starbucks drinks have ice in them.
Yeah.
And cold brew was just taking off like a rocket. So we would have people just trekking back and forth with all, the avocado smash prepared and the ice, no matter the climatic conditions. So it could be just dumping snow. People still drink iced coffees in New York in snow.
That's something I would not expect.
Oh yeah. So that was a logistical nightmare, but we just did it so well, and through no influence from me, but the team, they were just extraordinary. And we had a manager there, Anna Rayleigh, and she was extraordinary. And we had a number of teammates that worked there that ended up assuming much more senior roles in the organisation, and a couple that are still with us. So that was a bit of this breeding ground, like this elite team working there that really cracked the code, and then they've ended up having fantastic careers at Bluestone Lane, which I'm really grateful for. So I think after that, we're like, okay, all four are working really well. There's clearly tons of opportunity because Starbucks had nearly 300 locations in New York City.
Okay.
Sort of like, okay, there's a fair bit of white space. We're confident in our value proposition. We're building out processes, and there's a lot of people saying, hey, I'd love to be an investor. So I think that confluence of indicators gives you the confidence to go after it.
So you were being approached for, by investors to kind of come in and say, we like this. Let's get involved. Can you talk a little bit about who kind of came to the table?
Yeah, sure. So it was primarily high net worth individuals. There's a lot of family offices in the US, but there's a lot in New York City where they're looking after large pools of money, and they've always got appetite for different alternatives. And I think a lot of them come from their own entrepreneurial success, and they're looking to back people. And that's one of the great things about working in the US is just this, they love risk. They don't have the aversion to risk that I think a lot of Australians do, because the incentives in property ownership are just so overweighted versus anything else. So I think a lot of people just assume, why would I back a small business when I can just own my property and live in it and then flip it in a few years and probably double my money? And a lot of people have done that for many, many years, and it's underpinned a lot of people's retirement. So I love the fact that they love a story, they feel an attachment to it. And again, the tangibility came to the fore, that people were going in and they were seeing it and they were trying the product and they loved the experience, and they just got excited. They were like, wow, this could be really big. And we've seen Starbucks, and at that stage, Starbucks market capitalization is probably $100 billion. And that's
just mind blowing.
That was a huge awakening for me, because living in Australia, I had a very closed view on Starbucks. They were inferior, and they were product led, and they were transactional, and they wouldn't compete in Australia. And we ran them out of town. They didn't make it in Australia. And all these sort of biased views. And then you suddenly peel back the layers and you realize, wow, like they created the whole category. People didn't drink espresso coffee. Americans didn't drink espresso coffee until Starbucks arrived. They were big drip connoisseurs, which Australians never been. We went from tea to coffee, espresso coffee. And then you suddenly realize, wow, the market capacity, addressable market's so big here. But, I think that I remember one individual, which was pretty special. I got a text message from a guy called Matt Walters, who is a great friend, and he looked after part of Barry Sternlicht's family office. And Barry is the founder of Starwood Hotels. You might remember Starwood. They sold to Marriott. Starwood owned the W, Westin, Sheraton, so many other brands. And Barry really created that company. He bought it, I think, when it was distressed, and he created the W brand, and he was going to Bluestone. So Matt said, hey, Barry keeps going to Bluestone in Bryant Park, and he loves it. I just wanted to know, you guys raising money? And then the conversation went from, we are, and have a quick coffee and talk about the structure, the ambitions, the value proposition, the team ethos, the values, and then lo and behold, they're like, I'll come in as an investor. And for what, these people are very successful. So if they do like something, they have a propensity to back it. And I think if they really believe in the founder, like that's the most critical thing early on. I think they have to have a level of confidence, and the founder needs to be quite clear and concise in their storytelling, because you don't get a lot of opportunities to pitch people that are very time sensitive and everyone wants to see them. So I was very fortunate having a banking background where you're pitching all the time and you're trying to present analysis that I had confidence about articulating our pathway to growth and the authenticity about the proposition and how we compete and how the economics work. So it just sort of started from there, and
And I was doing a bit of digging, a bit of research in the lead up to this, and I came across that you also got some investment from, was it the owner of the Miami Dolphins?
Yes, Stephen Ross. Stephen and Matt Higgins, they are the co-founders of RSC Ventures, which is a growth equity venture capital firm. Okay. Very much focused on technology, sports, hospitality, and they have been extraordinary backers for us. So they came in a couple of years later in 2018, and that was our first really big institutional round. And again, RSC is a family office, so there's some tremendous advantages for that. It was more patient capital. It had longer duration, so it's sort of like an evergreen. It's not a fund where they invest under a certain time horizon. They'll commit, and in 3 years they've got to harvest their investment, or in 5 years. And then their network was so broad because Stephen and Matt are both very successful entrepreneurs in their own right. And Stephen, Mr. Ross, he owned the Dolphins. He redeveloped the Hard Rock Stadium. He's the largest landlord in New York with Related. Related own Equinox. Equinox owns SoulCycle and a number of other brands. So it's pretty extraordinary to even spend time with him and hear his stories and his principles about business and how he's achieved it, and focus on execution and how he's built teams. But that was a pretty amazing one, because I'd been pitched by them a few times, but because they had a bit of an eclectic portfolio, I was never that sure that they understood hospitality or that they were serious, because they had so much success in different pockets. And so I took a couple of meetings, and then, I didn't really think maybe that would be best for us. And then maybe 6 months later, I had a chance to catch up with Matt, who I hadn't really read about until like post the meeting. But we had this really long catch up, and we visited a store prior to our meeting, and the store wasn't being run very well. So I was being really candid. I was like, look how long this is taking, and the bin's overflowing, and why aren't they saying hello, and all those things that as a founder and entrepreneur, where you're wearing your heart on your sleeve, where you care so much about every local that comes in. I think he just saw what I was like and the passion I had, and then he got the story about my background and why Bluestone was created. It was created really to make a difference to someone's day, to be a human connection company, to be a lifestyle brand, not really a coffee company. And the passion for the Australian hospitality scene and coffee culture. And then we had that meeting, and then a couple of days, maybe a day later, I got a text message, and he said, what are you doing Monday? And I was like, I'm just, got to work. And he said, do you want to go to the Dolphins game? It's in Miami. And I said, yeah, of course I want to go. So I ended up, I was actually at that stage, I was likely to go on the private plane, the jet with Steve, but I ended up flying down. I think he went early, and I ended up going commercial. I ended up getting on the jet another time, but, which was definitely a career highlight. And flew down, and I was met at the airport. Someone, Mr. Stone, jumped in the car. Car took me straight to the game. Monday Night Football, Miami Dolphins versus New England Patriots. So it's a pretty good one, because I love the Pats, because I love Belichick, love Brady, love Gronk, love Edelman, all those guys. And basically, I was got a pass, escorted straight onto the field, and I'm just standing there by myself in the middle of the field. And I guess I'm waiting for someone to come and retrieve me. And it was amazing. I'm like, what am I doing here? This is awesome. And then sure enough, all the players start running out to warm up. And lo and behold, Mr. Tom Brady is standing next to me warming up. It was just one of those moments and I was like, what am I?
That's surreal.
I'm from Melbourne. I never worked a day in hospitality. Had a 6 years in the AFL, and now I'm being a banker, and I'm standing here. And yeah, so there's been so many moments like that have been, that I'll never forget, unforgettable. And yeah, that was one that was pretty cool. And I've had a few more since then, unfortunately. Yeah.
I mean, it seems like, for anyone else, or for, if you didn't have that banking background, and, you've built something, you start getting these inquiries from, very, very wealthy individuals, big investment firms, whatever it might be. That could be very daunting as to it builds the pressure. Okay, now this has become even bigger and more real, and there's going to be a big expectation of where we're going to take Bluestone. How did you kind of handle that expectation and that pressure once, you've been on the private jet of a NFL football team owner?
Yeah, no, I think that I was fortunate that being in the AFL at such a young age and trying to deal with the pressure to perform and to get another contract, and you're playing in the AFL, and you're basically playing for your career today, and it's in front of 70,000 people.
Yeah.
Maybe that subconsciously really helped me out. But there's been so many moments where I'm really nervous about, how am I going to pay people? How am I going to pay people back? Is this going to really eventuate to and reach its potential? And everyone believes in it. Why isn't it performing as well as I'd hoped or desired? And things like, the value proposition's right, the product's right, the real estate's right. Why aren't we executing really well in store? And is it the communication? Is it the way I'm leading? Is it the team I've built? Are they not inspiring? So there's a lot of pressure, but ultimately people invest and they understand the risk return ratio, particularly high net worth individuals.
Yeah,
they need to. And any one of my friends that invested, I always say to them, you got to understand that there's a very good likelihood that you'll never see this again. I'll do everything I can to be a great custodian of your money, but there's no guarantees. This is a private company in its infancy that is in a tough industry, and we're trying to grow quickly, which takes even more risk. And, we're going to do whatever we can to build it and create a lot of value, but there's no guarantees here. And, but there's some days where certainly you get concerned, and when when COVID hit, we lost 87% of our revenue in 2 days. You're effectively looking at the business failing immediately, unless we made some draconian, once-in-a-lifetime decisions to resuscitate and to stabilise, and that's what we did. But, I think banking helped me a lot in understanding valuation and metrics. But I would say that even having 10 years of international banking, corporate finance experience, nothing really prepared me for the wild, wild west of private capital and private term sheets. It might be like, what you do, Nick, like the stuff you see and what they ask for and the controls, and it all comes down to this operating agreement. And that's how I coach other entrepreneurs all the time.
Right.
Don't get too caught up on the valuation. Everything's in the details, and it's particularly when it goes really well or when it goes really badly. That's when this document is going to be sacrosanct. This is your constitution, and it will determine whether you do really well or whether you do really badly, or whether you keep control or lose it, or whether you'll remain. And that negotiating term sheets and those LLC clauses is probably like a whole nother chapter and something that I didn't appreciate despite coming from corporate finance.
Wow. And along the way, I heard through someone that someone's tried to acquire you a couple of times, maybe a rather eccentric individual that started a big, just a little company called WeWork. Can you share a bit of info about that?
I can just say probably not a lot, but yeah, certainly. Like we've had discussions over the years, and we entered into a partnership with WeWork.
Oh, okay.
Just prior to COVID in 2019, and it was basically it was ahead of its time. It really was about renting space by the minute or by the hour, which I think would have worked particularly well in this COVID landscape where people don't want offices because the utilization rate's so low. I had a fair few dealings with Adam over the years, and he's a visionary and extremely charismatic person.
Yeah.
And, there's certainly, some of the film productions or TV productions that have been produced are not, completely inaccurate with what he's like. But yeah, that was, we've had a few people kick the tires, but we've never really got to the stage where this is going to happen. And I think, Bluestone's 10 years old now. I think it's getting to the point over the next couple of years that we have to look at alternatives, and there's been investors that have been very patient for a long period of time. But it was, if you look at the phases in Bluestone's life cycle, you had sort of the testing and product market fit, just seeing if it's going to work. Then you scale a little bit, then you scale a little bit more, and then you raise some money, and then you really try and rapidly scale. And we were going through that process in 2019 and spending a lot of money on opening new stores. We got to 51 locations by the end of 2019, or at the start of 2020, sorry. And then out of the blue, COVID, and just flattens us. That's just a haymaker on the chin. And with our footprint, which was so overexposed to inner urban, particularly New York, DC, San Francisco, LA, like all these cities that have been battered and probably forever changed. That was really, really tough for us. So we had to get through that, and then we started to get on the front foot, which was my decision to actually lean in and take more risk because we hadn't raised any more money. And we were seeing these opportunities. If we could lend our brand, our operational systems and know-how, maybe we could turn around some of these distressed restaurants and cafes where landlords were desperate just to get someone in to have a sign of life, or to know that in a couple of years' time or a year's time that we could pay rent.
Yeah.
And then, that's what happened. And then there's been this acceleration again.
So how many locations are you back up to now that we're kind of through that pandemic?
We're about 59 company owned and, 6 or 7 licensed. So we're around 65 locations.
Yeah.
Across 9 markets.
And then, with excluding COVID, because, I guess that was just a beast that so many people had to deal with. And I wouldn't, there's no way you can call the pandemic, a mistake on a business owner's behalf. It's obviously very challenging, but I kind of find that, we learn a lot from our mistakes. And over the years, was there a few instances where you were like, shit, we really screwed up here, but it then took us in another direction, or we learned from it to kind of come out better on the other side?
Oh, exactly. The silver linings were everywhere. And at the time, I couldn't see them. I was very depressed and I was really concerned. But ultimately, you never want to waste a crisis, and that's what we ended up doing. We'd been pottering around on our app and digitally transforming the business and introducing things like third-party delivery and order ahead and order at the table, and having a universal loyalty program that aggregates all of the data and you accumulate loyalty no matter how you spend. There was different ways to serve and different operational refinements that we probably thought were too aggressive, and we can't be 100% digital. There's no way. You have to be able to let people pay with credit cards.
Yeah.
Well, under the sort of cover of COVID, you could incubate and try anything you wanted. And part of it was necessary because of social distancing, and people were worried about touching credit cards and cash and things like that. You think back on it now and you laugh, but people were serious. And, so we were able to try a lot of things, and we launched delivery, which was sort of 0% of the sales mix, and it's now stable at 25%, and it got up to over 50%. Digital, we were about 5%. We got that to 100%, and now it's steady state, around 50% of transactions are digital. Our app has been downloaded now 350,000 times, when prior to COVID it's probably 10,000 or 20,000. So transformational changes and things where you could go with reckless abandon like that. That was pretty liberating, honestly, as a CEO. That was when you just knew it couldn't get any worse. So now it's only upside, and just to throw caution to the wind. Okay, let's do it. What's your idea? Can we execute it? Yeah, I think we can. Are you sure? Yeah, I'm sure. Okay, let's just do it. And that was pretty inspiring. And we leaned out the team out of necessity, but you had really committed individuals who were so aligned to we really need this to work, or we're going to be out of a job. And that's what we did. And it was hard for a lot of Australians to realise that New York was ground zero in the US of this COVID epidemic. When it came out, say around March 13, 2020, there was already I think 35,000 cases in New York, and 2 of my closest colleagues had COVID already, and it was going through the team at a rate of knots. So it was very confronting. It wasn't this thing that we're reading in the paper and maybe it'll arrive. It was everywhere already by the time, and they declared a national emergency the day after, and that was it. Everything had to close. And next thing, the big hospital ship was arriving, and they were closing flights and access in and out of the city, and all these sort of rumors. And but it was the most stressful period, but exhilarating by the same. And I think everyone's expectations reduced to a degree because everyone was in it together, all in the same boat. Yeah. And that actually gives you a lot of comfort as an entrepreneur, because the whole time you do spend a lot of time sort of benchmarking, how are we going? How do you think they're going? Or are we doing well versus them? But in this case, everyone was at ground zero. Everyone had to find a way to navigate through, and we were fortunate that we made some really strong decisions that proved to be essential for our survival and recovery.
Did you kind of notice, because your focus is very much, a human connection and, that connection to a customer. Did you find that people were kind of rallying around the business at certain locations because, we were in a pandemic, businesses were struggling, especially, those in the hospitality scene? Did you kind of get any support coming back from customers and, once you could reopen certain locations or anything like that?
That was the North Star, honestly. We went from 51 locations to 14.
Right.
And those 14 stores were so essential because they gave us internally hope. They employed some of our team. They gave our locals who were primarily stuck in their apartments a sense of joy once a day to come out and get a coffee where we knew your name, face and order. And that was so essential to give everyone this hope that we're going to make it through. I can still get a good coffee despite being in my apartment 23 hours of the day. And then finally, we had to be open for the first responders, for the healthcare heroes that were working harder than anyone's known other than, I guess, in wartime. But they were backing up no matter what. They had to go to work and they had to keep people alive. And that was really inspiring, that mission. And it was incredible as a CEO, the selflessness and the dedication of the team. I'll be forever indebted for those that would go into work and work alongside someone whether you didn't know if they had COVID or not. And this is well before a vaccine. So there's a lot of people, there's a lot of tragedy happening around you. And they fronted up every day. And that was just extraordinary. That was one of the proudest moments we've ever had. And there's certain stores that came to the fore. Like Collective was unbelievable during that period. And they would pass coffees out through the window and it just gave people a belief that, hey, we can make this, we're going to make this through and we'll be okay and just stick with us. And I think it's underappreciated how much courage it took to work in a hospitality environment next to other people. And a lot of our team were coming in on the trains. We ended up giving them stipends to use Lyft or car service for a couple of months. But then we couldn't afford that because there were so few drivers. The cost was just through the roof. It was like 50, 100 grand a month or something. It was outrageous. And then it also gave us a greater appreciation of how far out our staff lived from our stores. So the public transportation is pretty fantastic in New York with the subway system and buses. But when they were getting car service, they were coming in, and it was taking them an hour and 15 and, because they were afraid of going on the train. So, it was just a really interesting period, but we had a North Star and the North Star was in front of us and the human connection and being hospitality-led and looking after our locals, I think inspired everyone to keep going.
So looking back from when you opened that first hole in the wall to now, having shifted from banking, no hospitality experience, is there anything you would have changed along the way up to this point?
I think it's all a lesson. I don't have any regrets. I think that I've tried my best and I've learned along the way. I've got so many things wrong during the journey. But, would I do things differently if I had a chance again? Yeah, there's certainly a number of decisions. From the very start, I had a few partners in the business, that I probably think about that a little bit differently rather than partners. Maybe they just work in the business and then there's expanding to the West Coast. Was I best placed to expand to the West Coast so early in life cycle? Probably not. I probably should have just stayed on the East for a bit longer and built that out because I underappreciated how much stress there is, trying to operate something on the other side of the country where it's a 3 hours time zone difference and the logistics, the supply chain, training, amortizing your corporate overhead across, it's like I'm going to set up in Brisbane, I'm going to set up in Perth. There's probably some other synergies on the East Coast. But I don't really have any regrets. I'm really proud of what I've done and how much effort I've put in. I'd say less about proud of what I've done, how much effort and commitment I've put in. Whether we get a great result or whether, Bluestone becomes a lot bigger or reaches its potential, who knows? But I'm certainly proud of that we've navigated some of the hardest hospitality periods in history with
definitely
COVID and then post-COVID navigating such a tight unemployment environment, record inflation And then you have this, probably the biggest challenge we're dealing with now is this transformation in the way people live and work, and how that's impacted, how that change has impacted our real estate footprint, which was very much focused on inner urban locations. But a lot of people now living in suburbs and commuting in. Yeah.
I meant to actually touch on this earlier, but when it comes to the growth of the business overall, like for anyone opening up like an awesome cafe that does immaculate coffee, great food, when you start to scale that and you start to opening up, multiple locations now, you said you're at 61 total, how do you kind of stay on top of, managing that consistency to make sure that the product you are delivering is up to the scratch that you expect it to be?
It's probably the biggest challenge you have. I think it's less about how hard it is to make coffees or to execute the menu. I think the harder part is to execute the service consistency.
Got it.
So that when a local walks in, they feel that they're in a Bluestone, that really they've been taken care of. They feel like they're part of the community, and that we're really sensitive to fulfillment speed. Because coffee, no matter how it tastes, like there is a sensitivity to it. A lot of people are drinking coffee on the way to going somewhere, or they're having a meeting and they're not sitting down for an hour to have a coffee. Like they're catching up for 15 minutes. Like it's such an amazing medium because it can be consumed quickly. And so I think the service element is probably where the greatest challenge comes. And that really is driven by your recruitment, your training and onboarding, and then the governance and accountability in the store. Like you need to have leaders that align with our values, that want to maintain the premium positioning, the focus on being hospitality-led, and big advocates for human connection, where our locals come in and they are recognised, they're acknowledged, they're embraced, and they have a good time. Like you have to provide an atmosphere that's uplifting and positive. So I think that's harder than executing great coffee. Like I think making a great coffee and making a great avocado smash, it's just sort of time and discipline and following the recipe, and you can pull it off. We're also not in fine dining where we're trying to be a Michelin star outlet, but for us, like, of course, coffee education is critical. We have coffee educators, we have a whole culinary team, and we have incredible materials around how to learn and the training. We have head baristas in every location, and they act as the most senior coffee sort of credentialed person. They're responsible for training, and then they get overseen by the coffee educators. So, and we eliminate variables. We obviously roast our own coffee. We send it to the locations. We manage how much coffee they have, how old it is. We have the same machine, the same La Marzocco machine in every location. We have the same grinders in every location. We have the same puck press. We have different steps that eliminate risks, and we have one way of making coffee. So that also leads to sort of clash. So we often get talent, like amazing quality baristas. They want to join Bluestone. Great. Yeah. But they make coffee a certain way. And we're like, no, we make it our way. And that's just incompatible with them. They may come from Blue Bottle or Stumptown or another sort of premium brand.
Yeah.
But they make coffee differently. And we're like, no, we make it our way. And that's the universal standard, so that when someone comes in, they know that it's consistently going to taste like a Bluestone Lane Magic or Piccolo or Flat White or Cappuccino or what have you. We make a cold brew the same way. So, yeah, they're those uniform elements that are critical.
Yeah.
But you need to have this level of bespoke that comes through the hospitality and the individualism of the different teammates and the way the store looks and feels. They're all sort of different, and that's really important to making sure that you're growing a lifestyle brand that doesn't feel like a chain, that it's more like a boutique at scale concept.
I can't stop thinking about this. It's so important how you keep referencing like that human connection element to the business, because I've had a couple of people on this podcast before, like Ed Moffat at Common Room Roasters and Kale Zahili back in Melbourne. He has a vacation coffee roasters business and several cafes, and it would always come up as to what defines like the Australian cafe culture. And it's I think it's it seems to be it seems to have grown a lot in terms of popularity around the world in a way. But I think when you try and explain it to someone, it's not necessarily it's because they make a really good flat white. And you've mentioned this before when we spoke. It is about that. If someone walks in, you say hello to them, compared to maybe just, I don't know if it's like, a Starbucks or whatever, but like, something else that's maybe more generic. Yeah. What would you like?
Yeah, exactly.
Do you want like a number one, a number two, and number three? Like
exactly the routine.
So it's probably the best way I've actually heard it explained.
Well, it's a feeling. And we did all of our market research for a number of years. When we asked our locals, we asked like thousands of them, why do you love Bluestone? Can you articulate it? And the most common, by about 70% of responses, is, just the way it makes me feel. And the feeling is that hospitality, intangible magic. It's the atmosphere, it's the recognition, it's the beautiful spaces, it's the cleanliness, it's the music, it's the smells, it's the people watching. Don't underestimate how much people love going to coffee shops and cafes just to look at the other customers.
Yeah.
And for us, I think that, and for someone that is a complete outsider at hospitality, never worked a single day, just a consumer. So I look at it through two lenses: customer centricity, like me as the local, and then sort of economic rationalization. So like economic rationale, like, does it make sense? Can you get a return? Are you using and deploying this capital in a mindful and productive way? And then the third one is brand. Like, I don't want to build a coffee shop. I want to build a brand so that it's more than just product. It's a movement. It's community. It has advocacy. So, I think that leading with product it's tough in coffee, because I think technology is rapidly accelerating, where you're able to have great coffee at home. And you can have great coffee at a Coles.
Yeah.
And a mate of mine oversaw that project, who I worked with in banking, Michael Courtney. I remember him coming across and saying, we're going to put these Eversys super automatic machines in every Coles Express.
Wow.
And I was like, that's the same machine that we are trialing to see how it would work. And, so it's only, I think, a matter of time before coffee continues to get better. And you see it again in Australia. Like, everyone has pretty much good coffee. Like, you walk down Chapel Street or Brunswick Street or Gertrude Street or Fitzroy Street or what have you, like, you're going to get 20 outlets that make great quality coffee. They're not going to make a poor coffee. One might be slightly better than the other. It's all subjective, but the coffee is going to be universally good. But what makes it memorable? Why do you come back to that location, not the other? And that was definitely the way it was working in the city. We would all have our locals, even though everyone served great quality coffee. It was that recognition piece where you'd walk in, someone would acknowledge you, know your name, face, and order. The music was right, the people in there were right, the menu was right. And for Bluestone, that's the big white space, because it's going to be very, very hard to compete with convenience when you're going up against Starbucks and Dunkin'. You've got these incumbent behemoths. Starbucks and Dunkin' have 70% of all coffee shops in the US.
That's extraordinary.
So you got to pick where you can win. And for us, and I think this leans into Australia and Australian hospitality, we are amazing social activators.
Yeah.
Whether it's workout groups, whether it's theatre groups, whether it's catching up socially and doing trivia at the pub. Like, Aussies love this. They're just social animals, and you see it come to the fore in the US. Like, particularly, we see it in the West Coast, in New York, these workout groups and these, fantasy football groups. All these Aussies are out there just like advocating and getting people together, and I think that just plays to our strength. So for us at Bluestone, like, that's where I think we can really win, by offering people a chance to feel like part of the community, which is addressing probably the greatest societal challenge young people in particular have, which is to do with isolation, depression, loneliness, lack of friendship and fulfillment. And hopefully we as a Bluestone as a bit of a medium to make them feel good every day, and they come in and it could be just a smile and say, "How are you, Stoney? How are you, mate?" That can turn around a really terrible evening.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. And looking towards the future, recently you've I'll say you starred in a TV show with Gordon Ramsay. just put a little bit of mayo on that.
It was a very short cameo, but thank you, Nick. Keep going.
How did that come about, actually?
I got a phone call actually from a producer on the show who was Australian. And he said, are you interested in going on a sort of a contest where you're the guest celebrity judge. And I was like, oh, I've never been asked that before. But yeah, of course I am. And it was explained to me that it's a bit like The Apprentice, but not with Donald, but with Gordon Ramsay. And you have these contestants competing in hospitality. They're all from hospitality backgrounds. They're entrepreneurs, and they're trying to win an investment from Gordon Ramsay. And you would be the coffee judge. And I said, yeah, very interesting. He said, but the problem is, at this stage, I was in Melbourne because my wife and 2 kids had moved back to Melbourne and Alexandra to give birth to our youngest, Clementine, and we hadn't seen our parents for over a year and a half. So we made the decision to go home and have the baby there and be able to spend time with family. At that stage, when we decided to go, Australia had really no COVID, so they were living liberally and doing whatever they want. And we'd been stuck with over a year of lockdown. In and off lockdown, and so we moved back, and I was sort of working between the US, keeping the business afloat, and then going back for the birth and that sort of thing. And anyway, we're in Australia, and I said, yeah, I have to be in Seattle in like a week. I was like, oh my goodness. So Alexandra really kindly said, yes, you can go. Flew to Seattle, and the production was so elaborate. They'd built 2 coffee shops from scratch next to each other, and then they had a third.
I did watch it. Yeah, I saw that what they put together, but that was just completely from nothing.
From nothing, and basically I went in as the undercover judge. They had about 250 extras that were going in as customers, and then I came in at probably like customer number 80 or something.
Yeah,
and ordered. And then I assessed, and yeah, it was great. Gordon was fantastic. He loves Australia, and his daughter had spent a lot of time there. She was on My Kitchen Rules, and when the season Nick Rewalt won, and I played with Nick. I know Nick, and so we were just. Yeah, it was a small world, but he's a great entertainer, that's for sure. And he's very successful, and he knows how to put it on. But yeah, obviously so credentialed in hospitality. But yeah, he was wonderful, and yeah, hopefully there's a few more opportunities there. That was a pretty good gig, actually.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, I think we've learned, if we've learned anything about those types of shows, especially when it comes to celebrity chefs, is that you're not making any of your money out of restaurants. You're making all of your money by putting on a TV show and having multiple seasons of them. Putting them into syndication, and away you go.
Yeah, I think there's something there, that's for sure.
And it's been great to have you on. I really appreciate you taking the time and sharing your story, and looking forward to seeing what comes next.
Thanks, Nick. Yeah, great to be on, and appreciate it. And yeah, thank you for all your patronage and support of Bluestone Lane.
No worries. Thanks, mate.